Hi everybody, it's Kira here from Toronto. Today we're talking about PR, what it is now and who benefits from it, as well as who can afford it. And today I'm welcoming Jordan Chanofsky, a New York boutique PR agency owner and a guy who knows to adapt a PR solution for technological SaaS companies. Hi Jordan, how are you today?
Very good to see you, Kira.
Yeah, same here. Let's start from this. You live in New York, but can you tell me about your favorite travel destination?
I traveled extensively. I would say for business travel and family travel, to be honest, probably would be Israel. I do that very, very often, and we've had wonderful occasions there. When it comes to sneaking away for something a bit more romantic and quiet, there is only one place on earth that I go back to regularly, which is Italy. And I have a great love for every part of Italy, and I've traveled it extensively. So other parts of the world are wonderful and they're interesting. I've done South America extensively in some wonderful places, but those are the favorites for me.
Oh, these are cool and warm. I love
Yes.
those as well, of course. So let's get to the topic. I don't hear about PR too much lately. So I wanted to actually ask you, can you explain to us, marketers, what PR is these days, at least for the audiences that you serve? And what did the pandemic change in how things are being done in PR?
Got an hour?
No, cut through the chase.
Those are extensive questions. So let's talk about PR at its basic form. When a marketing person typically has to engage with decisions about what they're going to do, how they're going to spend money, they generally look at a marketing mix. And PR, really at its basic core, is just simply part of the marketing mix. Mm-hmm. The reason that your constituents may not have heard about PR as much is because over the last 15 or so years, PR has been siphoned off into an area that's typically called marketing communications, or in some cases PR, but it doesn't typically report into marketing until you get to a very, very high level. And even there, I find that CMOs will often tell me, they'll admit to me that they're marketing people, but they don't know PR. But PR really is part of marketing. So what do we do in PR, and how has it changed in meaning? And that's an entire story in and of itself. At its core, PR is about raising visibility in the media. That's really the simple explanation of it. Over time, that description has expanded to include various other topics and subjects, and each one of those has undergone significant changes over the last 10 to 20 years. So most PR people or firms, I'm speaking as a firm, so if you don't mind, I'll talk from an agency perspective. Most PR agencies include, for example, the analyst world as part of our target market. For those who don't know or understand the analyst world, for us, it means industry analysts, not financial analysts. So we're talking about the Gartners and the Forresters and the IDCs of the world. These are firms whose job it is to cover topics in technology, write reports, meet with companies, make recommendations, and they're very, very important for us. For that reason, behind the scenes, these are companies and people that influence how the top media, even the trade media, will cover news. So when you have a conversation with a reporter, it's very likely that after that conversation, they'll go back to an analyst they know, and they'll ask them about the credibility, they'll ask them about topical related questions before they go and write. Content is also a dividing line in PR and with agencies. Dividing line because it's become a sore spot for many clients because it's hard to find people who can write good technical content. And so one of the things, by the way, that we have tried to do, and our backgrounds, which we didn't discuss, actually come from, in many cases, very technical backgrounds. I'm degreed in electrical engineering and physics. So when we put pen to paper, so to speak, we're writing from the perspective both of a marketer, but also someone that actually has technology in the background, but that's very unusual. And so PR people have attempted to stake the writing game, the content game, and that's certainly part of PR, but it's also become that dividing line where either a marketer will see PR people doing it, or they'll look at a content firm to do those things. Perhaps the most transitional part of PR, however, is this. There has always been a desire, an effort to attempt to measure the value of what PR is doing. So I get several articles. I publish a number of blogs. What does it mean to me? What am I getting out of it? That's a question that's asked always. 20 years ago, that question was really answered primarily by gut feel. And I kid you not. I mean, most people, most clients would say, you know, it's working. I mean, sales are going well, the company's going well. Obviously, that has to do with the ability of the company to produce good products, to sell well, to do good customer service. But PR and advertising and other vendors were carried along with the gut feel that this felt good. Mm-hmm. The objective of marketing has, and by persuasion of the CEO, no doubt, and the board, has been how closely can we tie PR to sales? And that is the battleground that persists for the last 50 years in PR, but now we're getting closer and closer. So the first thing that happened was social, and social gave us a better ability to track what we call in our field closed loop marketing. I send an article out, somebody sees an article or sees a post, and because of that, they drive back to a landing page or to a site. I can measure that. So I can measure traffic. Now, obviously, somebody may see an article and may be enthused or excited about a subject, might not go back to the website for a few weeks, and then something pings them and they remember that it's something they wanted to do, and they'll never remember that the article was responsible for it. But I think that people who are familiar with marketing understand that it's not always a one-to-one relationship between what you're doing in marketing and driving something that might be lead generation oriented. More recently, the term ABM has started to surface, and you'll hear it everywhere these days, account-based marketing. And account-based marketing, in my opinion, is nothing more than an ongoing effort on the part of management, client management, to bring PR closer to sales. And ABM really is about taking the assets and the effort that go into what we do and focusing on key customers and key customer acquisition. And so the field has transitioned, this is at a high level, has transitioned greatly from using PR simply for brand. We want visibility. And now it's gotten much, much more closely associated with part of the lead gen cycle. So that part has been driven not just by COVID, but COVID has created more of a need to use budget in an effective fashion. And COVID has also changed the landscape of what media is covering. And so for the first couple of months of COVID, it was taboo to even mention the word COVID in a pitch because we didn't want to be offensive. Today, and probably since, I don't know, May perhaps, there is absolutely no article that was covered without COVID. So
that's true.
it's a strange kind of thing. You have to go out with COVID pitches now, and I'm not comfortable with it because people are dying and it's a serious issue. But the fact is that the media will dictate what and how we go after different stories. And so COVID has been a fascinating study in this type of thing.
Yeah, you mentioned so many things, and I have to dig deeper in a few of them. This is the ABM community who is listening to that, so I'm wondering to see what the reactions would be. My first question would be, what you described sounds very close to what we call content marketing, which can be done in-house. What is the main difference between just content marketing in the digital space and PR, or how those can collaborate? Because probably you know what content needs to be in order for a tech company to get into TechCrunch, into Forrester report.
Yeah. Content marketing is an extremely essential part of a marketing and or PR campaign, but it's also limiting. It's limiting because not every publication will take your byline or contributed article as an example. In some cases, there are investigative reporters who will only cover the areas that they see fit. And you can submit anything you want to them and they simply won't cover it. So there is a good mix between content marketing and good old-fashioned media relations. They work hand in hand. Typically, we're doing a great deal of both. For example, in influencer engagement, content becomes very important. In fact, there was a time where you could mention that you go to the bathroom at 3 o'clock and post that, and that was acceptable. All kidding aside, today you have to have content that is meaningful, that is fresh, and it's not about how often it's not only about how often you're posting or blogging or responding the way it was, 5 or 10 years ago. You need to have something that is going to be valuable. It's not just about populating empty space. So content marketing is something that often is given to an individual in-house that probably only has one skill that for a subject that requires more than one. So you might have a writer, a really good writer, but they may not have the social skill set to know how to take that material and populate it effectively in social. They probably have absolutely zero understanding of media and what media wants to cover and how to bring it out. So, this has been the same subject with social. For a time, social was given to every 23-year-old that a company had. It was like an intern or something, and just go do social because it was a throwaway. I'm not going to pay an agency to do it. And lo and behold, social turns out to be a very strategic subject that requires a great deal of experience, a great deal of strategy, and content is still king. So you can post anything you want, you can blog about anything that you want, but ultimately what's going to bring traction is content that is valuable, that people care about, and that requires experience in the field and so on. Now, there are companies that have large swaths of management who can generate copy and agencies can edit it. That often is not the case. Most management that we deal with either are inherently not great writers, or they simply don't have the time to write all of that material. So what agencies bring to the table in this capacity is the ability to, first of all, write, if they can write technically, but then also bring the skill sets for social and for media and for influencer engagement and for analysts for that matter, bring those assets to bear, bring those talents to bear so that you are able to maximize or optimize the content marketing program with which you're engaged.
Awesome. What research do you do in order to ensure that the content gets where we want it to go? I've had a different podcast with a person from Research and Insights, and we just discovered the whole universe of how to do research before you do content so that it is insightful and it's helping your customers thrive. What is the case with PR? Because you have what industry is interested in, the company, your client, but you have those journalists or publications as well. How do you work with that?
When a PR program begins, there's a tremendous amount of research that goes into industry, competitive analysis, positioning analysis, media analysis and research. And that, by the way, includes both what reporters have covered recently, what topics they are likely going to be writing about, and through relationships, topics we know they're going to be writing about, how they want to be approached. And so by the time there is content to be developed on some regular basis, a great deal of research has already been done. Then depending on the nature of the content, there are a variety of avenues of research that can be taken. It might be a white paper, which doesn't really require that much research into industry. It's the technology that becomes very significant. And so we're working very closely with the technical staff of a client to be able to develop that. It may be a contributed article that is provocative in a subject. And I say provocative because, number one, provocative gets coverage, or it does not. Provocative is something that we enjoy dealing with. Controversial is even a higher level, by the way. If you get provocative, you have a very good chance of getting coverage. If you're controversial, you'll absolutely get coverage. If we're dealing with something provocative, well, then we have to have our facts straight. We have to know what's been covered. And so there's a fair amount of both secondary research, in other words, researching what's already out there. And in some cases, there's actually primary research that's done. So that might mean, primary research might mean a focus group. It might mean a media audit, going out and asking reporters who have no doubt been in touch with competitive players or partners or whomever they may be. And we can gain great insight from them. So depending on what type of content is being developed will dictate the nature of the research.
Lately, let's take half a year, or you said like from May, you're mentioning COVID. Which format works better with the press? Video, white papers, just articles? What is that?
This requires a little bit of thought. I believe that in general, video is always a great sell. Most companies, however, do not have great video. So all these questions are a little bit tricky. If you have great video is exciting, it's immersive, it's something that you want to watch. Then video, I would say COVID, no COVID, video is a great sell. And today, obviously, being online, there's a place for video outside of just television. So let me just start with that. The problem is that most people that I have spoken to in my career about video have a very different idea about what great video is. So companies will do some animation and they'll be thrilled with their animation. And by the way, it may be very good. Who's covering animation? So animation is great from a customer perspective, but have you ever seen animation on television or even in a video blog? I mean, it's so animation is difficult to work with. Then you have video where you have companies that are very excited about their products, and the products might be very technical. And so you're seeing, blips on a screen or charts and so on. That's not exciting video. And people who spent a portion of their lives developing products don't take to that well. They want to believe that those things are exciting. So I don't want to get too much into, I want to answer the question, but it's not easy to talk about video without at least making that point. So when a company is evaluating what techniques it's going to use to approach a market, first thing you have to do is you have to look at some lines of demarcation. For example, are you consumer B2C or are you B2B? Very, very different spaces. With our B2C clients, for example, there's a tremendous emphasis on television, for example, not necessarily video, but actually interviewing on television. We have a client, for example, that is in a very, very interesting area of thematic real estate, turning a museum or a residential complex into something that's more than just that. And these are people who, by the way, who were the ones who were developing the Disney parks and the other major theme parks in their past careers. So they have a lot of that theme park experience that they're applying now. And we've had them on every major network talking about everything from the concept itself all the way to what is it going to be like when Disney reopens during COVID. And so there's a great deal of opportunity with B2C, surpassing that of B2B for obvious reason when it comes to television. But B2B, by the way, has some, if you can consumerize your story, if you can make that story apply to person on the street, then B2B clients also have television opportunity. Where there is obvious change in COVID, but less obvious that there's been a transition long before COVID, is that if you were to go back, I don't know, let's take some time frame, 10 years or 20 years ago, the primary vehicles of PR were the press release and conferences. There was a time where we would get 30 or 40, or if you're working with a major company, 200 reporters together, and you'd make an announcement and everybody would be in the same room. And that has completely changed. And even though we are digital now, reporters simply don't want to spend the time doing that. The landscape itself has changed. There was a time where generally the fastest you would get to would be a week from talking to a reporter to press. Yeah, I mean, a newspaper might be able to pull it off the next day, but certainly the majority of publications worked on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And even if you spoke to a daily, even if you spoke to the New York Times, nobody was to say that they were going to write the article the next day. They might do it 3 weeks later when they had more information. Today, the world has changed. News gets out. It's out. It's online. It's RSS. It's repurposed, and it lives there forever. So bad news is populated forever. Good news is populated forever. Comments have changed the landscape. So the world of PR has changed so drastically because of the web, because of online capabilities, social, influencer, and so on, that there's almost no similarity between the approach to the market today compared to the way it was. I happen to, by the way, in the controversy of press releases, for those of you who don't know, there's this long-standing controversy as to whether a press release is still relevant or not. I absolutely advocate the use of press releases because the media still care about them. So it's not up to us. The day they stop caring, we'll stop caring. But until then, reporters absolutely still look for a news headline. And as a matter of fact, the news services that are out there, like Business Wire and PR Newswire, for those of you who haven't heard of them, they are growing by leaps and bounds. So you'd think that news releases might be withering. To the contrary, more releases are being published today than ever before at a more rapid pace. And reporters have on their screen a roll of all the headlines that are coming down, and they choose the headline that they care about and they click on it, and that's the one that they will work with. So press releases still are relevant. Interviews are still relevant. However, the hour-long interview is rare at this point. Reporters don't have time. They're busy. I think it was, don't hold me to the stat, but roughly speaking, 5 years ago, I think there were 150 some odd thousand reporters in the US, at least. There now are about 1/3 that number of reporters who have to cover more space because you have blogs and other things now. They don't have time. So whereas you could get coverage over something that was, I don't know, very broad and took quite a bit of time for the reporter to learn about, today that's just not going to happen. It's got to be hard hitting, it's got to be short, they're covering it fast, and as we spoke about, once it's out there the next day or the next hour. So the methodology of getting that information out has changed.
Yeah, so you have to know what you are doing, collaborate with probably PR agencies who know what the press cares about, and be agile, flexible, change fast. That's not an easy world to live in. Another question, usually the CEO is the spokesman of the company. Is that still the case, and does it still work?
The short answer is yes.
Uh-huh.
By and large, if you're talking about let's segment the media. If we're speaking about what we call the top tier, let's say the business press, the national media, they will almost always only want to speak with a C-level individual, and beyond that, the CEO. And if you're not going to present the CEO, your chances of getting visibility will be reduced greatly at that level of media. If we talk about the trade media, so these are technical publications, they are vertical publications. Certainly, you can go with non-CEOs. In fact, we very often use somebody other than a CEO because it's a buffer. Person might be speaking about something technical that the CEO might not have. The subject matter might bring up something controversial, and you can always fall back on, it's not me, it's speak to the CEO, and you'll never get the CEO in that case. Or at least it'll be in a controlled environment. So it depends on the segment of the media. The one thing that generally is still the case is that at the high level of the media, you cannot put a marketing person up, even if that person has a C in their title. So a CMO, for example, is not your best shot at getting into any of the business or national publications that we all can probably name.
Why is that?
They see it as marketing flack. I don't want to hear it from a marketing person. They're trained to speak that way. I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. I want the CEO, or by the way, the wacky scientist whose hair is all over the place and is dressing in some 1960 flower shirt. They love that because they're going to get insight, and they know that most of those people are loose cannons. They're going to get that information. And by the way, we've had great success dealing with these scientists who are often the founders whose names are not plastered on the front of the companies. They're wonderful people to put in front of the press in a trained and controlled environment.
That's the key. That's true. In trained and controlled environment. Yeah. How often do you recommend having that coverage, be it in the major press or trades? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly?
I would say it's not generally at the discretion of the company. It's at the ability of the company to get press. So if you were to say to someone, would you like press in the Wall Street Journal or TechCrunch every week, or would you like it once every 6 months? I think most people would say,
sure,
sure, why not? Obviously, unless you're Apple, Google, Microsoft, or a couple of other names that fall into that category, that's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, if a company is able to get into a TechCrunch or a VentureBeat or a journal or that ilk of publications, and they're in a startup mode, they're very, very lucky. Somebody's done something very skillful or used a very good relationship in order to effectuate that coverage. So it's really a matter of an all-out effort to gain access even once to those types of publications. We have clients that don't have names like Google and Apple, where we are called every day by Bloomberg, Reuters, Times, Journal to get to the CEO of these companies because they have there's certain information that they have that the media wants, and we don't necessarily always want to give them that information. And so we play a very delicate and interesting role intermediating between reporters who want to write a story, maybe not the story that we want, and a client that holds the goods to the information that they want. It's a luxury, but at the same time, it's a delicate luxury to have that. Where we gain in that is when we're able to work well with reporters in those situations, we gain relationships. And then we can bring other clients in, and we can use that leverage for other clients who might otherwise not get into those publications.
Does this situation exist where your client wants to be featured and they say, we'll pay whatever it takes just to be there? Does this work?
There are several ways of answering that question. One is there certainly is something called paid content, and paid content, which used to be called an advertorial in the old days,
True.
is simply an article, something that looks like an article that is paid for and is placed in a publication with payment on a particular day or week in a particular location in the publication, and it will run that way. And it will also say paid content. Some publications do a better job of making it look like it's part of the content, and others don't. There are other ways of doing this, and they're sort of the industry's dirty little laundry. There's some that believe that if you pay a publication for running an article, not a publication, an individual contributor to run an article, somebody who has that ability. And this is particularly true for blogs, where the difference between a blog and a publication is that the bloggers who work, and I'm not going to name particular blogs now, just to keep things neutral, but those bloggers have authority over what they write. So if you're working for the Wall Street Journal and you're a reporter, you have to bring your article to an editor, and that editor has to approve what you can't just arbitrarily write whatever you want. A blog is different, and there are some very prominent blogs, and those blogs are written by people who have much more authority over what they're going to write. There is some belief, and there has been some back talk in the industry about paying contributors to write features. I have never engaged in that, and I would never do it. First of all, it's unethical, and secondly, there's a huge risk, and it's happened actually, where news has come out that someone was paid off to do those features. So my answer to you is, and to your community, do not do that. It will come back to haunt you. If you want paid content, there's an entire market and industry that's set up to allow you to pay for content. Otherwise, have a great story to tell, know how to tell it, and build relationships, and you'll get coverage.
And I must say, I remember from the times we worked together, it was on the table all the time. We do not pay for coverage. I do remember that. That was years ago, but I do. I want to go back to KPIs for a second. You said it's becoming better, and PR can be tied to ROI or revenues or any other results better now. So I remember some CEOs measure press clips. Tell me, what are the 3 KPIs CEOs or CMOs who order your services are okay with?
There's no standard, I would say, but I would say that the areas that are measured are deliverables. So how many interviews, how many articles, how many X will you get? The ABM side gets more specific to driving traffic to the site. I want to increase my site traffic by X or X%, and that's becoming more common. And by doing that, we're forced to integrate more with the social practice, the web practice, even the sales team as well, to make that happen. We even have uncomfortably some clients who will say, within X number of months, we want to acquire 2 key clients. And we are put into the bucket with other marketing parts of the marketing mix, other marketing tactics to be able to achieve that. And that's an area that we're not happy about because we know we have much less influence, control over than the sales team does. But we're seeing a little bit of that. So somewhere between there.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see a certain number of deliverables. You want to see some level of traction. I think where there's always going to be a gap is going to be just as you come closer and closer to that link to sales. And there's always going to be a gap there because we are not a sales team. We're not a lead generation industry. That's not how we were designed. There are people who are in lead generation. However, without having any visibility, without having any influence, without having credibility, their job is going to be way more difficult. And it's going to take the sales team much longer to do. So it's not that we're not involved there, but we're not a lead gen sales industry.
That's a good answer. I take it. Last question. What do you think about podcasts? This industry has flourished. Everybody has a podcast, me as well. So what do you think of that? Does it help PR? Do companies need to have podcasts, videocasts? Do you work in that field at all?
My experience with podcasts has been that they're less involved with the media and more involved with direct customer traction. And we are involved with it. And there are areas, there are ways that we get more involved directly with customers. One example, just off topic for a quick moment, one example of that is something called the Tweet Up or a Twitter Roundtable, where invite whatever the constituents are to maybe an hour on Twitter with access to management of the company, maybe analysts, maybe other industry notables that they would normally not have access to. And you have a discussion, you have a Q&A that might be moderated or not. So those are ways of getting directly to customers. The podcast is another way of doing that. And we definitely support that through by raising visibility in the media for the podcast. Sometimes media can also be involved with the podcast, but I would say primarily it is a direct to end user vehicle. And I think it can be very effective.
Cool. So now I'm going to wrap up this discussion. Very insightful. And I'm scratching my head. If you're a company who doesn't do PR and really didn't think of that and didn't really allocate any budget so far, what are the tangible steps that the chief marketing officer or marketing community can take to evaluate whether PR or something that you do or your colleagues do can be a fit for a specific company?
Look, I'm not objective in this, but I think every company that has a working product should be doing some form of PR. It's just one of the key elements for any company. When you deal with B2B, particularly companies in that space, don't just need PR, but PR tends to be the primary vehicle, marketing vehicle for going to market. Advertising is not generally effective B2B, especially for smaller companies. If you're doing a direct marketing campaign, sure. I mean, if you're doing sales, absolutely. But generally, companies are looking at marketing mix, or looking at PR, they're looking at advertising, looking at direct. For a B2B company, PR is, generally speaking, it's the most effective means of going to market. And so I think everyone should do it. And evaluating it is simply getting yourself an agency, because it will not work in-house. It is one of those areas that is not an in-house area to be effective, as would be, in my opinion, advertising, and there are other areas as well. So it's a matter of evaluating agencies that can support you effectively in that context.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just recall that what you've done for the company we worked for was expanding to new markets. And PR was extremely effective because we just invested where we needed to invest, and that actually worked. Thank you so much, Jordan.
I enjoyed it very much. Good seeing you, Kira.
Yeah, same here, and we'll meet again. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.